back to their seats. Excellent. I'm just going to start off this panel by introducing the chair and moderator, Jim Bronskill, who's a reporter for the Canadian Press and an instructor at the Carleton University School of Journalism and Communication. Thanks, Jim.
Welcome to Panel 3, Making the Access to Information Process Work. I'm as excited as you are to hear our panelists. I'm, as Tim mentioned, a reporter at the Canadian Press News Agency. I use the Access to Information Act to unearth all kinds of records, including historical ones, some of them held here at LAC. It's a pleasure to be in the same room with a number of people who have helped me in my work. We will hear from our panelists and leave some time for questions. Our speakers are Allison Knight, Senior Director of Investigations, Priority Cases, Historical and Intelligence at the Office of the Information Commissioner of Canada, Kristina Lillico, Director General of the Access to Information and Privacy Branch at Library and Archives Canada, and Sébastien Chiasson, leader of the historical team in the ATIP division at Global Affairs Canada. Allison will lead us off, so without further ado, Allison.
Thanks, Jim. Good afternoon, everyone. Can you hear me at the back? Great. So I'd like to begin by saying thank you for inviting me to be here today. It's my pleasure to offer a few remarks to this audience. And I was just commenting to a few folks who've been at previous symposiums that this really is a very exciting time, very exciting audience. I remember the first symposium where it was quite a small group, quite a small venue, and it really has grown in size and interest, so it's very exciting to be here. So thank you, Alan and Tim. I'd like to bookmark my remarks with some thoughts that were offered by Tim this morning, and I promise you we didn't discuss this ahead of time, but there were a few things that really resonated with me. First, I really liked how you categorized different eras of ATI requests with LAC and those dark days of 2020 to 23 with the observation that it wasn't just COVID, right? These were bigger problems, things were piling up, and that really seemed to be the last straw. This was something that wasn't lost on the Commissioner or the Office of the Information Commissioner. And in January 2021, the Commissioner decided to initiate a systemic investigation against Library and Archives because of what she was seeing on the complaints side. Just a technical note, when the Commissioner initiates an investigation, she doesn't have order-making power, so if you skip to the end, she needs to think about what can be gained from such an investigation, because of course there are resource implications both for our office and for the institution being investigated. So at the end of the day, she was able to issue a number of recommendations, but again, they are non-binding recommendations, and she can also table a special report before Parliament. So keeping that in mind, she looked at the time frame of April 1st, 2020 until January 20th, 2021, and we looked at the number of complaints that we had registered at our office at that time. And the main question was whether LAC was meeting its legislated obligations to provide timely access to records in response to requests. So not even looking at the redactions, we're just talking about whether or not LAC was able to respond in a timely manner. Almost 80% of the requests that we looked at did not comply with the time frame. So either they were not able to respond within the 30 days or within the time extension taken. Obviously this points to a very big problem. Then we looked at the types of requests, because obviously LAC receives a large number of requests, but for different kinds of records. So 56% were historical, military, and civilian personnel files. Those generally are not the files that we see under complaint. 43% are from the archival collections. That's where we see 95% of our complaints. So really, we are talking about the historical collections when we look at our business and what we're seeing on the complaint side. And then there's the remaining 1%, which is the operational LAC records. So not a big market for those, unfortunately. So what we saw was the problem getting worse. COVID didn't help. But there was an increase in requests and a decrease in closures. Just to give you a few statistics, so the backlog that LAC was carrying over in 2018 was at 500 files, but by mid-2021 it was 2,000. It resulted in an increase in complaints. So we reviewed the over 200 active complaints that we had during that time period. Like I said, COVID didn't help. Because when individuals were not able to get into the office, then records were not retrieved, requests were not even assigned, and there were no time extensions taken. At least when there is a true assessment of the scope of the request and how much time it will take to process, then it gives everyone a better idea of when things are going to be released, if anything will be released from the collection. But otherwise, it's a 30-day time frame, which really isn't realistic for many of these historical collections. So the Commissioner issued 10 recommendations grouped by theme. So the first, quite simply, is to respond to the backlog, which is much easier said than done, which I'm sure Kristina will be able to tell you a lot more about. The Minister of Canadian Heritage responded that LAC will recruit and put all staff onto reducing the backlog except for urgent matters, and will respond to requests in the order received. The Commissioner's reaction to that was, well, that's not really a strategy. I mean, that seems to be kind of operationally what you would do day to day. So a bit of an underwhelming response there. The second, to respond to requests with the outstanding consultations forthwith. Again, there's no specific timeline there, and I'll speak more about consultations in a moment. For new requests, to establish a rigorous process to determine the length of the consultations and respond. So those really were the recommendations on timeliness. A little bit more on the outstanding consultations. So for the time period under investigation, LAC was saying that they had 445 outstanding files with consultations with them. And those were from 8 different institutions. And I think we can all hazard a guess as to who those 8 institutions are. LAC claimed that it had to consult on security and intelligence matters because they didn't have the experts to be able to make those decisions themselves without recommendations. But the average consultation time for these files in that time period was 3.5 years. Dennis is nodding. Yes, that's your experience?
That's pretty good.
But the Commissioner rejected the assertion that LAC didn't have the subject matter expertise, and I think it's even more true today that they do in fact have the expertise. It's part of their raison d'etre. They have archivists who work on these collections every day. While there may be some consultations that are necessary on very specific information, the idea that entire files would have to go out to the originating institution for general recommendation simply wasn't accepted by the Commissioner. The Minister responded that there would be further training on delegated authority and collaboration with other government departments. So again, a bit underwhelming. The Commissioner was a little bit disappointed by that response. Running alongside this, there were a number of recommendations that she was making to the government on legislative reform, and one of those is that there should be a statutory maximum time limit for consultations in the Act. This has not been taken up by the government. Then we move to the classification problem. It really, really complicates issues for all of us who are involved in the processing of the request and of the complaint when we are dealing with highly classified documents. So she had 3 recommendations in this regard: that LAC process the top secret requests forthwith. Again, not a very detailed recommendation, but we didn't get a very detailed response either. To implement an infrastructure for efficient processing and to ensure access to the LAC network at all times. And that is kind of a COVID-related recommendation, because when people couldn't get into the building, they weren't able to access the processing software. And during the darkest of the dark days, I believe LAC was not even able to open the containers in which top secret information was stored. So there was absolutely no processing going on of those records at that time. But Kristina, you can correct me if I'm misspeaking on So the seventh recommendation was to require institutions to declassify or downgrade records before transfer to LAC. Unlike other jurisdictions, we do not have statutory requirements for institutions to transfer within a given time frame, and obviously we do not have mandatory review for declassification or downgrading. The minister's response was that they sent a copy of the initial report that the commissioner wrote to Treasury Board. The eighth recommendation, to negotiate adequate funding for the ATIP unit, and I think we have some better news on that front. That may be one of the recommendations that's done. To adjust permanent funding to reflect ATIP's workload, because obviously funding had not kept pace with the increase in requests. And then the last recommendation, which Kristina will be able to speak to during her presentation, is to publish an action plan with biennial dates. So I think now we're actually getting a really good sense of the impact that the systemic investigation has had on LAC, the good that has come from it, and that's why we're able to enter this new era. I definitely don't want to personally I don't want to take credit for it, and I don't want to speak on behalf of the Commissioner of the OIC to take credit for it. I think that a lot of the heavy lifting has come from Kristina and her team, but the systemic investigation really got the ball rolling. I think it brought the attention to the issues that were required in order to get the funding models to the right people, and to make this more of a public issue, to put a little bit more pressure on the government to fix some of the problems, to begin to fix some of the problems. So in addition to the investigation, the Commissioner also tabled a special report with essentially the same messages directly to Parliament. And she broke it down into the two main problems that she saw affecting government. So quite beyond the problems that LAC was encountering, she was saying that these are issues that need to be fixed government-wide because LAC can't do it on their own. So those two obviously are the consultations and the declassification pieces. So she suggested to the government that the directive that has been established by TBS to the ATIP community, it should clarify that consultations occur only when needed, because right now they're not mandatory, but it needs to be further clarified, and to provide guidance on when they're needed, because there is still a bit of a risk aversion and a culture of better safe than sorry, better to consult than not consult. And again, that the Act should provide a maximum time frame for these consultations. Because again, 3.5 years average for a consult isn't doing anyone any good. A lot of these really fall off the radar and are only picked up again once we step in and during the complaint process. I know I'm preaching to the choir here, but the processing of overclassified records is costly and burdensome on everyone. We are the only Five Eyes country without a declassification system. We really are the outliers now. The government did conduct a pilot project, I believe it was almost 2 years ago now, a year and a half ago. It has yet to produce any tangible results. No records have been released as a result of that pilot project. The Commissioner has been quite skeptical of the information that she has received to date from the government. So what can we do on our end, on the OIC's side? The Commissioner does now have order-making power. She's had order-making power since 2019. She publishes all of the files where she has issued orders, so at least we're getting word out to the circumstances of the orders. Hopefully these are of precedential value to the entire community. I realize that the refusal files are probably of more interest to this group than the administrative complaints, so actually explaining which redactions were accepted by the Commissioner, which were rejected, whether there was further disclosure on specific topics. The majority of her orders to date, though, have been on administrative files. So those are the ones where there has been no response yet. Those who are waiting forever to get their packages. So against LAC, there have been 29 deemed refusal orders to date that have been published, and only one on exemption. So I think that speaks really, if I may, Kristina, to the work that LAC is doing when they do get to the redactions. We haven't seen yet a lot of files where we've had to challenge to the point of an order on the redactions that have been made. It really is the timeliness piece that has been the big challenge over the last couple of years. And Tim, I said that I would bookmark my remarks. So another thought that came from you was, time to release and time to resolve complaints as being two big challenges. That's specifically why the OIC has had to focus on the deemed refusal investigations first and foremost, although I understand that we would all love to get into the meat of some of these redaction files. We really have to clear the backlog of deemed refusal files first. We have to get packages into people's hands, then we can deal with the greater boxes. The OIC has now issued, or the Commissioner rather, has now issued hundreds of orders, not against LAC, but across government, overwhelmingly on the deemed refusal files. And there have been dozens of applications now before the federal court, because if an institution takes the decision that they cannot meet the Commissioner's order, they cannot respond by the date that she has ordered them to respond by, the next step in the process is for them to apply for judicial review before the federal court. And again, if you look at the efficiency of this and the resources that have to be committed to then getting the lawyers involved, doing the affidavits, the cross-examinations, and realistically, by the time we get a hearing date, the file has probably been responded to. So it's not the most efficient process, but it's the tool that the Commissioner has been given, and she's not hesitating to use it at this point. There's also been one mandamus application by our office. So an instance where an institution had indicated to the Commissioner that they would comply with the order, and then they didn't. She had then decided to put a mandamus application before the federal court to essentially force the institution to comply with her order. The date had already passed, so the result of this particular one was a consent order where the institution acknowledged they were out of compliance with the Commissioner's order, but there has now been this consent order with a new date, and if they miss that date, it's not just the Commissioner that they have to contend with, they'll be in contempt of court. Again, understanding that this is not a speedy process, but these are the tools that we have, and we're now at the point of using them fairly regularly. And I just wanted to thank all of you in the audience for your patience on the complaints process, for those of you who have been involved in complaints. Dennis earlier mentioned something about trust, and I think it takes a lot of trust on the part of the complainants when dealing with the team that I work with, most of whom are here today. You can give a little wave. Because we can see the records, and you are the experts generally in the subject matter that you are pursuing. We've tried to build a lot of expertise on our team as well, but it does take a fair bit of trust. When we say to you, you are unlikely to get more, can you please reassess this in terms of value to your research? And is this the file that you want to go right to the end on, or are there others that have a higher priority in your list? So I just want to thank you for that trust and your patience as well. And I'll turn it over to Kristina to tell you more about the new era that we're into, the brighter days ahead.
Can you hear me now? Good at the back. Thank you, Allison, and thank you, colleagues. And thank you to Alan for the invitation to speak to you today. Like Allison, we've been present for some of the previous symposia, and it's really great to see how many faces are out there, how the interest has continued to grow. And we're so pleased on the LAC side to also be part of this conversation. And I want to say that we do recognize that having these conversations is so important to inform how we can improve how we're doing our work. It for us is really critical. So thank you again for the chance to be here. So, LAC ATIP, there's a revolution underway. I want to say we don't use the word revolution lightly. This is really how we're framing the kinds of changes that we're making to LAC's approach to its access to information work. And you'll see in our action plan that is the language that we use as well. Allison spoke about the Information Commissioner reports. These presentations will be circulated so you can have access to them and the links to the things that are shared there. But within the two reports, of course, Allison told you about the specifics of the shortcomings that we were facing, and I don't think Allison mischaracterized anything in the way she said it. We really were facing a very critical situation. Things were not working. We had the volume of requests we were receiving, we just did not have enough people to process them in the way that we had been doing our work at the time. And not only the number of requests, but also the scale and complexity of the requests that we were receiving. So they were growing in size in terms of number of pages, but also in the type of content that was being asked for. And it had a huge impact on our ability to respond, no question. And I think it is also fair of Allison to say that the Information Commissioner's report really did help shed light in a more public way on our shortcomings and how we would then have to take action to address them, and the push to provide us with some more funding. And as you'll see, we are in the process of receiving about $100.6 million over the course of 6 years. And that is targeted to address both the backlog that we had in place, or I should say continue to have. You'll see a bit about our progress there, but also to address some of the challenges around class action litigations and access to historical records to support those processes across government. To respond to the Information Commissioner, this report, we did publish an action plan, and talk a little bit about the action plan. But I'm going to start here. So I chose this quote for a couple of reasons. And I know that you, the audience here today, won't be fooled by the attribution to Albert Einstein, which has been debunked. But we all know that if we can't access our documented history, then we'll be continuing to misattribute, misinform, or information will just be left unexplored and unanalyzed. And this is a disservice to Canada and Canadians who need to understand our history to inform the way forward and to not repeat the errors of the past in order to provide real justice for Canadians today. So taking the quote itself and not worrying about the incorrect attribution, here at LAC, we really recognize that we would never be able to return to the previous way that we did our business in ATIP. The law changed, the way researchers and requesters are seeking information changed, and including the volume of scope, as I mentioned earlier, and we could no longer do the work the way that we had been previously doing it. We ultimately want to turn the tides in our efforts from a reactive access to information process to being able to be proactive in opening what's in our holdings and ultimately working upstream with the departments to open things as much as possible prior to or at least upon transfer to LAC. And this is why we'll continue to be involved in all the GC-wide efforts for initiatives like declassification and supporting effective information management. All of these things end up having an impact on us. And consequently, so our starting point is our ATIP action plan, and it outlines how we're responding to the Information Commissioner's 10 recommendations. We've grouped our activities into 3 main pillars, and since we published the plan, which was last December 2022, there have been many exciting accomplishments to date. We do publish semi-annual updates, so we did update in June, and we'll be doing another one in December 2023. But here is just a snapshot of some of what we've achieved and where we're focused next. I'd like to highlight that since April 2022, we've reached the target to reduce our ATIP backlog by 40%, and we've made some improvements in our response times beyond meeting legislative deadlines. Now, we know we still have a ways to go there. You'll be very interested to note that we have reduced the number of pages sent out on consultation by 92%. And I'll be telling you more about how we have done that. We've also made improvements to our technology infrastructure, particularly to process and communicate with partners securely when handling classified top secret material. And as Allison mentioned, that was for us also a big pain point, a sticking point. A big part of last year's effort for us was building our new team. We knew that even with changes to procedures, we still have a volume workload that we need to accomplish. We were previously about 40 people in the ATIP shop at LAC about 2 years ago, and we're now over 150 people in the ATIP branch, which was officially formed last September in 2022. And these aren't all ATIP analysts, and this is part of really how we're changing what we're doing. We have in place some of the supporting structures that exist in other departments. So we have a registration and triage team, a reporting team, a training team. But we also have some teams that don't exist in many other ATIP shops. We're talking about that. And I will also say there's been an investment across all of LAC, so not just within the ATIP branch specifically, but to all the teams that are part of the important chain of supporting the response to an ATI request. So the people who move the boxes, the people who actually digitize the pages of records, the frontline folks in our client services team, as well as within the team of archivists, the portfolio archivists. So it's not just happening within discreetly the ATIP team. There was a recognition that this is a problem that touches our whole institution, and we have to really shift what we're doing. Now, where in the past we had about 3 ATIP analysts dedicated to working on requests related to military, security, intelligence, international affairs. Is that fair, Kristen? 3, 4, maybe 4, sometimes in lucky days. We now have a team of 7, and I would say it's still growing, exactly. And what's made the real difference are some of the different approaches we're taking to the work, and I'm going to tell you a bit more about those, of course. Now, I'm not going to scoop my colleague Nelson, who will be telling you more about declassification in panel number 4, but let me tell you more about 2 specific approaches. The first is our archival research team, and the second is our proactive access approaches. And you may have heard in the past about our block review program. Well, it is coming back with force. So I think I'm preaching to the choir here, but as we know, LAC's in a unique situation. Our consultation requests that we were sending could literally sink another ATIP team and another department, and it was not unusual for our consultation requests to be in the hundreds or sometimes thousands of pages, and we recognized that within those departments, they don't always have the historical knowledge or expertise to inform us of sensitivities while taking into account the decrease of sensitivity due to the passage of time. And we also recognize that our ATIP analysts, while they build historical knowledge expertise, are also not experts about the department or extent of LAC's holdings. That's our portfolio archivists. And they're not as informed specialists on the subject matter as many of you here today are. So, recognizing that we needed to find a way to build in better consistency in our own work, but also to inform how we exercise our discretion under the Access to Information Act, to inform our complaints review process, and ultimately to give us the right information to help us make the right decision in a timely way about whether or not we really needed to consult. We decided to establish a brand new team with the responsibility to undertake some very specific research to inform our analysis process. So this is the archival research team, and there's a few of those folks here today with us. It means we have a dedicated team of archivists within the ATIP branch who are resourced specifically to do this research task. So the goal is to build our collective knowledge, bank of information within the ATIP team itself to ease the burden on the ATIP analysts themselves. Now, how does it work in practice? When we receive a new incoming access to information request, the analyst will make a request to our research team when they need information on a specific topic. And then research is conducted into a variety of sources, publicly available, published, including specialized serials, a wide range of sources, including Canada Declassified and others, our own previously released ATI package, as well as research into what other jurisdictions have released on the same subject matter. So the research itself is scoped. The research team have a timeline to conduct it in and write a report, including source references, and then the research is provided to the analyst who can use it to inform their ATI review process. Now, since the team's formation, as of today, our archival research team has produced 154 reports. They have about 224 so some are still underway, on a range of topics from biological weapons and warfare, nuclear weapons, international affairs and defense, the Joint Intelligence Committee, or JIC, military aircrafts, airplane crashes, immunization, land rights, to name a few. All that to say, we're using those research reports to really inform not only requests in the complaint status and our backlog, but that are being reviewed, but also for our new incoming requests. Now, here is where this gets really interesting. The time invested in that upfront research has informed our discretion and has resulted in a significant reduction in the number of pages set out on consultation to other departments and agencies. It now takes on average for our military intelligence ATI request team about 49.950 days to complete an ATI request. And approximately half of the new incoming requests for that military intelligence team are completed within 30 days. Now, hypothetically speaking, if we had applied our past practice approaches, we would have taken an average of 269 days extension on those requests if we decided to consult with other departments. And out of 27,000 some pages processed on closed requests, where the archival research team has been involved, the military intelligence team was now able to release 25,000 pages and redact and withhold only roughly 1,900 pages. All that to say, the results are really proof that a different informed approach is allowing us to exercise our discretion in a much more direct informed way without burdening our other colleague departments. Now, I'll caveat all that to say, there are still times when we may determine we need to consult, but we're really trying to make sure that we're doing our best to make the decisions we can with the knowledge that we'll have in front of us, so as not to continue to overburden the system. I'll talk a little bit about our proactive access approaches as well. This gives you an idea about 2 ways we're beginning to undertake proactive approaches to opening records. Now, you've probably heard about our block review program in the past. We've already opened more than 50 million pages of records proactively through those efforts, and those records no longer require an ATIP request when someone wants to see them. With the volume of our formal ATI requests, and because of COVID and other factors, we actually had to stop doing our block review process a few years ago, but we're bringing it back in a new way. For those of you who don't know what it is, block review is a risk-based approach. We apply a sampling methodology to determine if we can open blocks or sets of records as a whole without a page-by-page, line-by-line review. Now, it does require a few basic things. Records have to be well described. We have to know what's there. Homogeneity really helps if they're similar from one box, one file to the next. And the sampling has to demonstrate that they don't contain sensitive information that would be withheld under ATI or privacy. Now, if we do find something to that effect, the record set really is no longer a good candidate for block review. But all that to say, records of interest to this group may not be great candidates because of the nature of the content of what you're looking for. We did, in the summer, pilot a project where a client request from 2021 was processed in accordance with the block review principles and criteria. Our complaints management team had identified a request that we thought met most of the criteria and would be a good candidate for block review. And in that case, the age of the records, they were older than 20 years old. Was there a frequency of use or request by researchers? The records were in high demand. And level of description, was there a good level of description to inform our work? Is there an adequate finding aid? Now, though that pilot, again, was not about military security intelligence records, the opportunity is really there for wider use of the block review risk-based approach in the future, whenever possible, either at the suggestion of the teams who know the usual review of these records better than the block review team does, so the archivists in their portfolios. Now, that said, while block review would have normally a limited involvement with more recent military security intelligence files, anything pre-1945 may offer possibilities to open records in blocks as well. And for instance, it's part of our plan to study the Second World War military personnel files and determine if smaller blocks could be made open to the public. And these are records that are in very high demand. They're a huge part of our backlog queue and take a lot of time to process. In the future, and I will say, we hope that a proactive review team could be developed and put in place. And this would be something where we would review records in a proactive way, resource permitting. It's a little bit more intensive than a block review because it requires more deliberate review of the pages. Block review is the first step, proactive review is the next step, and it's the next team that we're looking to build. So our goal is to continue to use this option by own initiative through client recommendations and as a way to process new incoming ATI requests if we see good candidates that could go through that process. And our intention is to try to increase the ratio of records that will be proactively reviewed overall to keep us moving towards that goalpost of reducing or eliminating the need for an ATI request wherever possible. Our ongoing changes to procedures as we examine those principles of sunset clauses to exemptions and updates to our delegation instrument will also help us not only do block review more, but also inform our approach to responsive ATI requests. So overall, our focus, to focus our reactive ATI efforts where the requests really are the most complex or the most sensitive and where we feel that investment is required. I do have in the deck a few slides on our statistics, but I'm going to go quickly. I think the main thing I would say is that we've seen in the last year a leveling off of the number of requests we've received and the number of requests we're able to get out the door. The far bar graph you'll see was just a continued escalation of our backlog that continues to grow. With all the people we hired last year and some of the changes we're now making, we're starting to see a leveling off, and I think we'll see at the end of this year it's going to be better. Specifically in our military intelligence team, again, you can check out these statistics. I think the main thing to show here is that we've made progress, but we know we still have more progress to go to clear that backlog and continue to be more in that category of meeting the legislative timeframes. And I'm proud to announce too that as an update to our backlog numbers, we're now at 50% achieved in clearing our backlog. So it really is going at an accelerated pace this year. Now, if I can leave you with a few important tips, and you can read our next steps. Of course, we're going to keep clearing the backlog, refining our processes, and really continuing to implement the changes we've made. I want to leave you with a few important tips for how to make ATI work. We know that many of you have ATI requests underway with LAC, and many of you already speak proactively with the LAC ATIP team when you have those requests in our queue. This is so important, so we can tailor our efforts to prioritize the requests that are most important to you to receive first. So please continue to do this. And taking that one step further, if you know you're on the cusp of submitting multiple requests, please reach out to us proactively before you press the send button in the system. It can create a lot of work behind the scenes when we receive 10, 30, or 50 requests from the same requester in the same day. And given that we both have the same end goal for you to get what you need in a timely way, we can help you to plan how to sequence those submissions so that we receive them efficiently and it doesn't create extra work in our registration team. And it could mean anything from grouping requests together rather than 10 separate requests for 10 single files, or having a better clarified understanding of which requests you prefer we focus efforts on first. All that to say, we want to continue to work with all of you proactively ahead of time to make sure that your requests can be processed as efficiently as possible. Thank you.
Hi everybody, you can all hear me. Just want to start by saying hello and thank you for showing up, and thank you Alan for the invitation, and thank you for LAC for hosting this beautiful place. My analyst has said he has been involved in decorating the bookcase, so I want to point that out. Now, I'm just going to introduce myself a bit and my team. I'm the team leader of an amazing team of 6 people that's called Team Historical. Our main responsibility include the treatment of records of over 30 years of age that have been requested under the Access to Information and Privacy Acts, provide ATIP advice regarding historical material, and lastly, training and educating the department on the processing and treatment of historical material under ATIP. So that's sort of what our team's main goals are. So I'm going to give you a brief presentation outline. You'll be broken down in the following order. First, about building Team Historical, what led to us to actually be created, what we did about the ATIP process, the tools and resources, collaboration with partners and stakeholders, ongoing challenges, future initiative, and finally suggestions to researchers. If I'm speaking too fast, let me know. I tend to do that a lot, so I'm sorry about that. First, I want to give you a bit of background. So the team was created back in January 2020 due to several reasons. First, There was a surge of ATIP requests across multiple departments in 2017 on historical hotels material. This led to a growing backlog of related consultations to our department. Second was the passing of Lawrence Smith, who's pictured here, and I want to give him credit because he was a pillar of the work, and Kristina knows him well as well, because Larry worked for the GAC ATIP shop and the LAC ATIP shop, doing what essentially are reviews of ATIP requests. And it was a huge loss when he passed away, and I want to give you the immensity of his impact. Larry processed, what GAC alone anyway, I don't have LAC stats, but it's processed over 1,500 files, totaling over 500,000 pages. He was essentially a machine, and I had the pleasure to work with him a bit briefly before he passed away. What happened is that when he died, his backlog was then added to ours. So my team had quite a large one to tackle. The backlog itself was significant in volume, totaling more than 65,000 pages, with about 50% being top secret. This was too much for one standalone analyst to process. I was that analyst, while also attempting to meet legislative requirements. Fourth, treating top secret material brought other challenges, as there were no specific guidelines or tools, but instead they were processed by hand with cover-up tape. So that's how we treated TS material. Fifth, treating historical ATIP requests is complex, requiring the analyst of having some general historical knowledge of international affairs, as well as research experience in locating pertinent material to help in the review. Finally, Sébastien and treatment of historical material was not always consistent. So this was a lot of the things and many more that led to create Team Historical. So when a team was created, we looked into establishing a consistent approach when treating historical material, such as doing cross-referencing research online into repositories to ensure all public information is identified before review by subject matter expert. And as a side note, I will be speaking to Kristina more about her team on this particular subject later. Hiring 2 retired former GAC employees that can draw on their own general subject matter expertise to identify ongoing sensitivities and flag material that should be sent for consultation in the department. Collaborative workflow on consultation files where they are reviewed by consultants and then analyzed by analysts from cross-referencing and tasking in the department. By doing this, it reduces the volume of material we send for consultations, both externally and in the department, and the number of subject matter experts and departments involved in the review. To give you a glimpse, GAC has hundreds of divisions. So if we have a file that has many subject matter in there, you can imagine the duplication of pages being reviewed. And at the end, my analysts would have to read each of these same documents and making sure that the information is both entered and reviewed accordingly. So by reducing that, that certainly helps a great deal. We also collaborate with other departments by sending or review proposed release packages to accelerate review. Those means sentences have been entered, for preliminary review was done. We try to make sure that what's being released or we consider releasable is being looked at more closely. Finally, by equipping my team with tools and guidelines so they can ask pertinent questions to challenge reviewing officers on the sentences, such as, is this going to impact anything today? Are you considering the passage of time, etc., etc.? So since the establishment of the team, we have been expanding our tools and resources to do our work more easily and more consistently. A few of these includes getting access to the Canadian Foreign Intelligence History Project database. Thank you very much for that. It's been very helpful. It predominantly contains documents required to access the information process or to open archival material relating to the history of intelligence assessment in Canada, as you all know very well at this point. This enables my team to search and compare with information in the public domain in order to focus solely on the remaining information. Creating digital tools enable us to treat top secret material easily and in a timely fashion. Building a repository of online resources and websites for my team to consult. One example is the Global Affairs Canada Digital Library pictured here. collection of books was also assembled to assist the researchers as those published by the department, like the 3 volumes of Canada Departmental External Affairs and Canada's Documents of External Affairs series. Finally, by sharing guidelines and providing training, it helps my team and the department to gain more knowledge on how to treat this type of material. We have also been working with different partners and stakeholders. In the department, we collaborate with different divisions, such as Liam's team, the External Review and Transparency Unit, which is responsible for the repository of historical, national, and intelligence in the department. As the main subject matter expert for most of the material we process, we constantly work closely on several fronts, including modifying the process, such as the collection and scanning of records, establishing a standard approach to summonses, collaborative work on policy, participating in working group, and establishing a priority list. The second one is the Information Management Support and Services Unit. They manage the remaining repository of historical material at Global Affairs Canada. We turn to them for advice as well to help us locate and send us the relevant material for processing. Finally, the historical section, they are responsible to promote a greater public understanding of Canadian foreign policy and the history of Global Affairs Canada. They have been valuable in providing advice as well as helping us build our collection as those wonderful books I mentioned earlier. Additionally, we work with other government departments as they are our main source of ATIP backlog. Also, several of our ATIP requests get impacted by delays on their end. Due to this, we work together in a number of ways. Examples include prioritization and exploring creative ways to complete consultation, establishing more direct ways to exchange responses. We also collaborate ad hoc or to working groups on processes, policy, and even litigation cases. Finally, we share tools and repository as much as we can. Finally, we have been collaborating with requesters. For instance, they kindly share tools like repositories, documents, and references to assist our team in getting more context. In a sense, they are the subject matter expert, so it helps to have their assistance, or to help in our review. In turn, we assist them in finding ways to get what they need in timely fashion, either by modifying the request text, by exploring approaches to the request itself, or where to do their search if it's not found in our department. Despite these improvements, there are ongoing challenges, including a lack of Canada-wide declassification structure. While relying more on Access to Information Act to treat the historical material, I'm preaching to the choir here, but it's definitely an issue. No clear step-by-step procedures on downgrading material. Insufficient historical subject matter expertise, causing subject matter expert to treat historical records in the same fashion as contemporary records. Limited staff with proper clearance to process and review. And finally, the amount of time required to do historical research and cross-referencing. That said, we are exploring a few possible avenues, or they are on our wish list, such as establishing a department-wide policy on the treatment of historical material, possible collaborative approaches with other countries on things like foreign consultations, as well as comparing processes. And finally, streamlining the process across departments, such as testing different ways to reduce duplication of effort. Finally, I was asked to provide a few suggestions to help you in your search for historical material. The first one would be narrowing the scope of your search to key time frame for particular subject matter. Second, excluding material you believe does not have any interest in your research can help as well. If you are unsure where to start, instead of requesting all material on a particular topic, you can make an ATIP request in multiple stages, as being more strategic in your research. The first could be asking for a list of all files or references for a particular subject. After you receive that as your response, you can make a new request and say, make a new, that specific file or ask to do a search within that particular series. So it's almost like a tiered step-by-step process. If you plan for asking a significant number of files in full, a staggered approach instead of all at once works best. Finally, if you have background information or related primary sources in your possession, including them in your request certainly helps us during the search and review as well. Thank you, everyone. This is, if you need to make general media inquiries, you can make requests to the specific link if you want to ask for an ATIP request. If you have more questions, I'm happy to answer them or find someone who can help you. This is my email. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you all. We do have time for questions, so don't be shy. I'll start off. Oh, do we have? Okay.
This takes me a little longer.
Still faster than an ATIP processing.
I was not going to comment in that regard.
I said it. Yeah.
So my name is Rob Martin. I'm the oldest graduate student in war studies at the Royal Military College, and I'm quite happy with that. I'm a retired guy. The question I have is two-part, I think. With Library and Archives Canada, when you release information based upon an ATIP, is that cataloged anywhere with respect to the record that I can find online so I can then go to that? First question. And I guess the second question is, do each of the departments keep a catalog that's readily available to us researchers on the ATIPs that have already gone out there? Because we can kind of expend an inordinate amount of time asking something that's already out there.
So could you repeat some of the, I'm sorry, I need someone to repeat the question for me.
I can.
I'm sorry, I'm hearing.
No, that's okay.
So I may start to begin to answer the question and you'll get there too. The question was about, well, first of all, about previously released ATIP.
The finalized ATIP,
Final
just
packages.
link it on the record site with your MECAN and with your other resource material.
How do they then know, how do people know what we've already released? So I'll start with, on the LAC side, what we do, and then I'll pass to Sébastien to talk about what GAC may do. So first of all, any ATI requests that are processed, you can always go to the Treasury Board, some ATI summaries website, and see what requests have been processed over the course of the last at least 2 years. And I believe, and I think my colleague Charles is in the audience, but I believe they've now extended that deadline. They're no longer being removed after their 2 years have gone by, which was the disposition period. So you can still search past summaries or like the subject of what the old ATI requests were, and that covers all departments' ATI requests.
Through Treasury Board.
Through the
But
Treasury
not
Board
LAC
website.
itself, so
I'll get to that. So in the past, LAC was also posting to its website our own ATI questions and release packages. One of our biggest challenges is that an ATI request can be really specific, only certain files, or a question might be broader. And what we've struggled with is how to then connect that to the way we have descriptions in our databases, our MECAN system, which is very structured to the archival references, right? Going down from the record group and not usually down to the file level. I'm looking at Melody here, but it would stay at a much higher level. So from a technology standpoint, it's actually very difficult for us to have something to hook a digital image to and make it available. Having said that, this is something that we're actively working on to try to publish our past ATI release packages. And we have kept the ATI release packages going back many years on the LAC side because we know the nature of the ATI requests we get on historical records are things that researchers, historians want to see and use again and again. So our goal is to try to make those available through a clickable download so that you don't have to then come to us to ask that we re-release to you a copy of that package. You absolutely can do that today. Come back to us through our request channel and ask us to re-release a package. But our goal is, I would say, within the next year, that though we're going to find the right way to make those things available on our website so that you can go and click and download. But there is work that we're doing right now to figure out exactly how to make those searchable and findable, because the way that our archival descriptions work right now through MECAN it's not an obvious link to connect those things
Right.
back. So whether that becomes its own discrete set of pages and searchable way, those details are still being worked out. But it is part of our plan to make those available through our website.
Okay, thank you. So Sébastien, my question was, as a department, do you guys keep an accessible catalog of ATIs that have been released so I can come and either see that digitized online or I can know what to look for because somebody else has already done it 10 times?
Hopefully I understood correctly and I'll do my best to answer it. So there's the Open Canada link that does exist. If you look through that, it does contain a list of ATIP requests and request text. So you could start by doing a search there to see if anything pertains to your subject is there for you to request. Our department does something called basically an AI, which is an access informal request, where in essence it's free. You just basically ask, could I have a copy of that package that was received? And there is you cannot complain as this is not your particular request. You can certainly get that. If you cannot locate that on the website, you're always welcome to informally contact our team. If you look online for Global Affairs Canada ATIP, there is an email address you can use. And we can certainly search through request text to see if there's completed request that does pertain to your research and say, perhaps you could request these. So we can certainly do that. Finally, there's technological limitations for us and more in the sense of searching inside the file. Because our software, I think we share the same software perhaps, it's wonderful, but it's very dated and has challenges when it comes to trying to locate, let's say, a particular subject. So we could try, but I can't guarantee how well it is done. But always, we're happy to help. If you want to contact us, we could certainly look into that. I think that's what your question was.
So you've helped to educate. I mean, there's no one-stop shop, but I just need to learn more about
No,
what's out there.
no, but you can certainly contact us and we'll
Okay.
certainly help.
Thank you.
Just to pick up on that, I think Charles and I were talking earlier. One of the issues he was discussing, and one of the issues I've heard over the years is that to do reading rooms or to do these kinds of online repositories of records that have been released, the Official Languages Act comes into play, and everything must be done in both official languages. Are there any thoughts or comments on that, or is that an impediment?
I can speak to LAC's approach on that. In our case, we have a specific approach around archival records in that we do not translate every single record that gets transferred to Library and Archives Canada. We do go to a certain level of description of those records in both official languages, and that's how we meet the requirements of the Official Languages Act. But for archival records themselves, we would not be translating every single thing that we receive, or we would break the bank for the Government of Canada. So when we go to post online our past access to information release packages, the packages themselves would not be translated, but the description around what it is, as we do with our other descriptions, is translated.
To be frank, it's something's been discussed, but I don't have more information on my end to be able to answer it, but I'll certainly look into it. Feel free to email me if you want. I can try to get you an answer.
Hello?
Hi. This is a question for Kristina. I was really interested about the research reports that you were talking about to kind of like limit your consultation process. And if you could say a bit more about those. Specifically, I'm wondering, like, can you share those with us? Are you making those public? I think some research here might be interested in meeting that stuff. Yeah, if you could. Is it 229 that you've created now, or 150? I had various numbers, and I wasn't sure how many you have. But yeah, if you could speak a bit more to that, thank you.
Sure. So regarding those research report products, those right now are They are our internal products that we're using to inform our research process. But I think, as Sébastien alluded to, we are already seeing connections and opportunities for how within the GC we are even taking similar approaches to our work and how we could benefit from sharing those with each other to try to help inform our processes. I'll take back the question of would we be willing to share those publicly and see where we could go. There may be classified material within the research reports themselves. I can't speak to the specifics of that at this point, but I'll take that question back, because what I was also speaking about with Tim earlier was, again, how can we make sure that we continue to have the right conversations between requesters and the ATI community and those who are involved with historical records in general across the multiple departments that get implicated in these processes, so that we are being as efficient as possible and not duplicating effort as well. And I think between Global Affairs and LAC, we already have a long-standing past practice of sharing information about the types of records that we're asked to analyze and release. And we already know, in some cases, Global Affairs' standpoint on certain topics, so that we don't have to go consult with them on those specifics. And the more we can do that up front, again, the better the result will be, the more efficient it will be for everyone. So I think we're very interested in sharing those more broadly to inform our process. And again, I'll take back the question of public sharing. But right now, they're really meant for our internal use.
I just want to add, for any other ATIP shops that are in the crowd here, I'm sure we will be very happy to talk to you and share and collaborate as things go forward. Thanks.
And on the complaints end as well, same theme of not reinventing the wheel, making sure we're as efficient as possible.
I'm sorry, Allison.
Yep. So in terms of being as efficient as possible on the complaints end, Kristina, if I may share, we've actually started to see some of the research reports in the complaints investigations, because that gives us a jumping off point too. We understand the research that LAC has already completed. We can compare our sources to their sources, and we're not duplicating that research effort. And it goes a long way right at the beginning of the file, justifying the decisions that they made on the specific redaction. So it really gives us a much better place to start. So I know I'm very appreciative, the team is very appreciative of those reports.
Thanks, Dave. Appreciate it.
Okay. Allison, quick question for you. Solicitor-client privilege.
No comment.
Are we, I guess, is there any movement at all in terms of how things are interpreted on this front? Have they changed at all? I mean, clearly Canada didn't stop making laws in 1914, but unfortunately, being able to do legal history makes it quite difficult when you can't get access to what is the government's thinking around creating a law or amending it and all those other various good things.
Sure, so I can't speak for the government in terms of taking their temperature on this issue and whether or not there's any movement. I can give you one good investigative example, though, that I think might give you some hope. And actually, it was an LAC file. I think we can jointly answer this one, Kristina. So there was an exemption complaint investigated by the OIC that involves Section 23, so this is their client privilege. These were quite historical records, and the position ultimately of Library and Archives, subsequent to various consultations, was that they would not be releasing these portions. The commissioner's order, so in terms of discretionary exemptions, so ones where we're reviewing the factors that the institution took into consideration in making their decision, and sorry, it's going to get a little legalistic and technical here, but The order that the commissioner can release in those, or can issue in these circumstances is not to release the information. It's to remit the decision back to the institution to say that they need to re-exercise their discretion in a reasonable manner. And the way the commissioner gets there is she looks at all the factors for and against disclosure that the institution considered, and if there's one missing, or if there's an irrelevant factor, such as, let's say, embarrassment, that was considered, then the commissioner could come to the conclusion that the exercise of discretion not to release was unreasonable. But again, she can't order them to release the records. She can order them to go back and reconsider it in a reasonable fashion. And that's what happened here. The commissioner was informed that, in fact, the institution had reconsidered and would not be releasing the information. And so in that particular case, the complainant decided to apply to federal court under Section 41. And before it came to hearing, I think before even before the factums were filed, the government did decide to release all of the information. So really good outcome, maybe not the most efficient process. Does that indicate that the needle is moving? I don't know, but I do have that one example for you. Kristina, did you want to add, or you'd rather not? It's okay. If only to correct anything else.
Nope, I think, yeah, again, Allison characterized it very, very well. I think this solicitor-client privilege in historical records continues to be a real challenge for the government of Canada as a whole, and if I can say LAC in particular, I think the way that the ATI legislation is framed with the exercise of discretion, each institution whose records are under its authority has to make the decision about how it will exercise its discretion. On LAC side, we do have an approach for how we try to evaluate the potential sensitivities around solicitor-client privilege in archival records. It is a very labor-intensive evaluation process to try to arrive at a conclusion with, and I will say, does not help us to answer ATI requests faster or in an efficient way. So we're also trying to think about how that could be done differently. But it's, I think, what I would just say at this point is that solicitor-client privilege remains an ongoing, very challenging component of the ATI legislation in how we have to exercise discretion, because there is rarely agreement on how to determine what is sensitive or not.
Thank you. This is a question for Allison. One of the most interesting things that came out of the new ATIP legislation a few years ago was the order-making powers for the commissioner. So I'd be interested sort of in your views on how the commissioner sees exercising those powers, and also sort of your comments on how departments have responded. Have they got more defensive, or they sort of recognize this is a changed environment and they're going to have to respond? Anyway, I'd be interested in sort of how that additional power has affected the work of the OIC.
So I think it took some time to get rolling, for sure. The order-making power came into effect in June of 2019. There were not a lot of orders in the first year, but now I think it's safe to say that it's pretty run-of-the-mill now. It's pretty regular that orders are going out the door. The commissioner does not hesitate to order when she sees that to be the appropriate mechanism. Again, the majority of the orders, just by the nature of our inventory right now, are administrative orders, so orders for an institution to respond to the access request within a given time frame. I can't speak for institutions, obviously, I can't speak for the government, but in terms of the impact on our work, I mean, I don't think any of the institutions like being in the position of having to tell the commissioner that they won't be able to comply with one of her orders, right? I mean, that's just not the position, especially not the ATI professionals. That's not a position that they want to be in. I think just given the volume of orders that some of the institutions have received, they've found themselves in that position. And again, it becomes kind of a race to the hearing date, right? Can they respond before they get to hearing? The cross-examination process is not a comfortable one. I don't think it's something that coordinators enjoy going through. It takes them away from their very important work as well. Again, this is just the nature of the power that has been given, and will it change things? I hope so. We've only had the one case where the commissioner has gone forward with a mandamus application. So I mean, out of the hundreds of orders, and the thousands of files that we look at every year, one is a pretty good number so far. But it definitely has changed the nature of our work. I don't know. I wouldn't say that institutions are more defensive. If anything, I think this has helped us get to resolutions faster. I mean, we all have to remember that it's something that we haven't mentioned yet, but the vast majority of the files that come on complaint to the OIC are resolved before we ever get to those end formal stages of initial report or final reporting. We're talking upwards of 85% of the files that we get, we're able to resolve them before we run the whole process. So, is there even more of an interest in doing that? Probably, when you think about what happens after the order gets issued. But again, they're operating within the confines of their own resources, right? They can only do what they can do.
I think we have time for one more question. Thank you.
My question is for Sébastien. You mentioned that the establishment of Team Historical was partially to reduce the backlog, consultation backlog. I was wondering how the results of that have been.
I've been trying to pull the accurate numbers, to be frank with you, but I believe, and please don't say this is the accurate one, because I would have to double check, but it's about 1% or something like that that's been reduced. And within the amount that was not closed, less than 31% closed, it responded about, I'm trying to remember the exact number on top of my head, but something like only 12% left that hasn't been vetted by my two senior consultants. So a good amount was already been reviewed, and a lot of work has been done. And my team has grown quite recently, so we're taking this very seriously and trying to close the remaining ones that's in the backlog. I hope that answers your question.
Okay, I want to thank all of our panelists for the stimulating discussion and the excellent questions from the audience.